Hi, this is Ryan Phillips here. This is a very special, unique video for me. Very honored to be doing this video. I'll be analyzing the first game of the match between Jon Trivett and Chris Reynolds. They were very gracious in allowing me to do this, so pretty honored to have this opportunity. Unfortunately, I finished the video last night, and the only time I seem to have any problems is when I click the save button on the video recorder, and it kind of saves the file. Like 2 or 3 out of the 15 or so videos I made so far, I've had a problem with that, where there's, at the very end it says that it didn't save properly, or some kind of error message like that, and I lose the video. So I'm hoping to kind of figure out a way to not have that problem in the future, because it is kind of a pain to have to redo the whole video again. The last video I did, I'd only looked at the game once because I wanted to kind of have some fresh ideas throughout the video. So it's kind of like my thought process on the game, as well as the follower, their thought process as the game's going on. But unfortunately, now that I've already done a video, I think I have some clear ideas about the position. So it won't be so much my thought process as going through the game, as it will be some ideas I've kind of memorized from last night now. Anyway, though, I decided to shoot the video with the black piece on the bottom of the screen because I'm pretty familiar with the Gruenfeld. So I thought the video might be better quality if I analyze the position from the point of view that I'm familiar with. So the first game, it was a Seville Gruenfeld variation, and I wanted to give both players a lot of credit. I thought it was a very honorable thing to do, to kind of go into this Gruenfeld variation, since I think both sides knew that each other were booked up on this variation. So it was kind of like they decided they were going to come guns blazing, and each side knew what the other side was going to do, and they figured they would see who would be more knowledgeable about the variations as they kind of arose during the game. So I'm kind of curious how far deep the theory went with both players, if they knew the resulting position at, say, like move 15 or so. I think Chris deviated with Queen D7 at some point, and that's a very rarely played move. So I think at that point it's likely that that Jon was out of his book, but he played the resulting position extremely well, Jon, and he ended up earning a pretty well fought win in this game. I think this is gonna be a good match, though. I'm hoping that the future games are as exciting as this one, and I wish both competitors a lot of luck. I think they both are playing pretty good chess, so it should be a good match. So game started off d4, knight f6, c4. So Jon's just going straight ahead with c4, most common move in this position. He didn't try to play like knight f3 or anything. Try to avoid some sidelines that black could possibly play, such as like e5 in this position, or some weird variation like that. So with c4, he's basically just playing a straightforward opening Jon. And I was pretty surprised that Jon actually did play d4. I was expecting him to play e4 in all the games, and try to play like some classical variations. So I thought playing d4 was again very. I thought it was pretty cool that they both went for the Gruenfeld in the first game. So g6, and then again Jon just plays straightforward with knight c3. Another logical alternative is knight f3, and then after bishop g7, the option of playing the Gruenfeld at some point with d5 is available, or the King's Indian with d6. After knight c3 by white, basically Chris is forced to play d5 immediately if he wants to play the Gruenfeld variation. If he plays bishop g7, for example, after e4, he's pretty much relegated to play d6 in the King's Indian defense. So Chris does opt for the Gruenfeld with d5. So interesting. Gruenfeld's always an interesting opening. Basically, black is temporarily giving up the center. For compensation, they hope their pieces get more active, and then they have some nice pawn breaks, potentially with c5 or e5. Generally, c5 is more common. Try to break up the white center after white's able to establish the center. So this is pretty common. The c takes d5. Another variation would be queen b3, the Russian variation of the Gruenfeld, which this is always giving me it's a little bit of a tricky variation. I think I've been looking at some games of this. I don't know, probably about 10 months ago. I looked at a lot of these games, and I feel a lot more comfortable playing against this variation. But it is pretty tricky. It is pretty tricky. The queen kind of takes a early aggressive post, and if black's not careful, the white pawn mass like e4, e5, d5, it could be pretty it can be pretty menacing against black if black doesn't know how to handle it properly. But yeah, Jon went with the standard c takes d5, and then Chris's response is pretty much forced with knight takes d5, and then Jon played e4. So this is by far the most common move. Another possibility is knight f3, which isn't played too frequently, but it's a fine move. Nothing wrong with it. So e4, and then Chris played knight takes c3 here. So the only real alternative to this move would be knight b6, and with the knight on b6, it's a very passive knight, and at the same time it's white to move again, so white could develop another piece like bishop c, or not bishop c4, sorry. Basically anything but bishop c4, like knight f3, bishop d3 maybe. I don't know, that's probably not a good move. I mean, but anyway, probably knight f3, and then even bishop e2 and castle. But by taking knight takes c3, after pretty much the forced recapture, b takes c3, then it's black's turn again, so they can develop a piece. So it's much better. I mean, if you put the knight on a passive square and then white gets to develop another piece, it's, you know, that's not inferior to just capturing, giving white better center, but then you have the move, so you get to develop a piece, so your development's a lot better, and you don't have the passive knight. So Chris played bishop g7 here. Another interesting move is c5, which is not as common. I think this is an interesting, trying to change up the move order a little bit, confuse your opponent. Objectively, it's just slightly inferior to bishop g7, but nothing major. And you know, if you get pretty familiar with the black side of this line, maybe you could figure out a way to take advantage of not using a tempo to play bishop g7 right away. Although eventually I believe the bishop has to go to g7, but in the interim maybe you could make some use of that tempo. And there's really no threat about this diagonal being attacked, not immediately at least. With the pawns on c3 and d4, you don't really have to worry about this diagonal at the moment. But anyway, Chris played the much more familiar move with bishop g7, and then here Jon played bishop c4. So Jon had a choice between bishop c4 and knight f3 are the common moves here. He went with bishop c4, which is a more aggressive setup. And the idea behind bishop c4 is that it takes a nice diagonal. The a2 g8 diagonal is pretty nice for white to occupy at the moment. And then also it lets this knight develop to e2. And the idea with the knight on e2 instead of f3 is now you could potentially push the f pawn at some point. So if you play the knight to e2 before developing the bishop, then obviously it's harder to develop the bishop. You have to play either g3 and develop the bishop to g2, or you have to move the knight again to say g3 or f4 or something like that, and then move the bishop out. So moving the bishop out immediately makes the most sense. And then Chris played the typical Gruenfeld idea of c5. So this c5 push is extremely important. White has this fantastic center with the c3, d4, and e4 pawns. And if black doesn't try to attack the center at some point, basically white's just going to keep building up the pressure in the position, and black will pretty much get suffocated. So this is black's way of getting some counterplay in the center, which is necessary. You can't allow your opponent to have all the play in the center. So Jon defended with knight e2. So basically, black is defending the only kind of weak point in the white position. Its d4 square is a potential weakness. So with c5, he's attacking this pawn, and knight e2 is protecting it and developing a piece and preparing castles. So knight e2 is very logical, but also a very strong move, just continuing development and protecting the center squares. And I'll show the next move. So basically, both sides castle here. I think knight c6 is a little bit more active move. I prefer that a little bit more, but I don't think it's too drastic of a difference. Computer evaluation is exactly the same. I just prefer to keep developing the pieces, and especially after the bishop moves already. After knight c6, an idea like bishop e5 isn't really that strong. The bishop had to move 2 times to get to the b5 square, and you know, black has adequate time to parry any threats. So castle here, and then so castle's the main option for white, and then knight c6. So knight c6 is logical, of course. Putting the knight behind the c pawn, which is typically very good, and then attacking the d4 square again. And this is the variation that I wanted to talk about. I sometimes, you know, playing the Gruenfeld myself, I don't even think about this move that much. You know, it's something that should be thought about because it wins a pawn with d takes c5. But d takes c5 is generally pretty bad in most of these Gruenfeld positions. For one, the pawn structure for white is not good with the pawns on c3 and c5. And then also with the d4 pawn not occupying e5 anymore, it's a great spot for the black knight to jump to. And it's very hard to defend both these pawns. So variation like queen a5, for example. And something like, if you want to try to defend the pawn with, say, bishop e3, that's something like knight e5. And even though white hangs on to the extra pawn for a little while, black's piece activity is just very strong. The rook's going to jump to d8, hitting the queen on the open file. It looks like even knight g4 is a good move, hitting the bishop. I guess if knight g4, bishop d4, probably e5 or something like that should be good. And then if white tries to do a counterattack like h3, just take the bishop, and then if the knight gets taken, you can either take this pawn or take the pawn on g4. So either the c3 pawn or the g4 pawn. So black will get their piece back with their pawn back with some interest, and I think a better position. So yeah, I'm always d takes c5 is a move that you should be considering if both sides of the Gruenfeld. I'm sure there's some positions where d takes c5 is a playable move, but a lot of games you'll see where that c5 pawn, black lets that pawn hang for 10, 12 moves. It's not that uncommon, and white never really decides to take it just because it gives black a lot of good piece play for it, and it kind of messes up the white pawn structure. So Jon played bishop e3 here. So again, everything's really revolving around this d4 square. This is the crucial point in the battle. It looks like white just defends and black attacks. So it's interesting. I kind of talked about this more in the first video. I guess I've been neglecting it in this video so far, but it's interesting the advantage of the white light squared bishop to the black light squared bishop in these positions. This black light squared bishop really doesn't have any good squares to go to at the moment. Anywhere it kind of goes, it seems like it could easily be kicked out by a white pawn. So if it goes like bishop g4, for example, f3 kicks it away. The only real square it could go to is bishop d7 at the moment, or black could try b6 and bishop b7. But the problem with b6 is that after b6, d takes c5 is then very strong, because black is pretty much forced to recapture with b takes c5, and then now it's black that has just as bad of a pawn structure as white, and the c5 pawn is just as weak as the c3 pawn, and then white's pieces become a little bit more active, I believe. So a variation that I kind of play a lot, that I've become fond of is I like I kind of like this idea with c takes d4 here a lot. Plays in a lot of blitz games, and then knight a5, bishop d3, and then bishop e6. And I kind of see these, especially in blitz games, my opponents very rarely play the best move, rook c1. I'm often faced with d5, and then after take the rook, queen takes, and then f6. The point is that the pawn is pinned, so if the d takes e6 is played, winning the black bishop, then black can just play queen takes d3, getting the material back in a more active position. So anyway, this is a kind of a variation I've become a little fond of. I've played quite a few blitz games in this line. Okay, apparently it doesn't want to close. There we go. So anyway, yeah. So in this variation, there's a few possible lines. I know bishop h6 is pretty common. And then sometimes you get like a variation like this. So it's pretty level, but it's a good type of level because there's imbalances. So there's a material imbalance, and there's like a structural imbalance. So even though it's a equal position, I think both sides are playing. I think all three results are on the table still. Any white or black could still win, or it could be a draw in this position, which I like. So that's a good kind of like attacking, fighting chess. Anyway, though, Chris played for the Seville variation with bishop g4. And so in this line, black usually gamuts a pawn for activity. And I think this is a great illustration of just how much better the white light square bishop is than the black light square bishop, that black is willing to sacrifice a pawn to get some activity and make their pieces better. Because it looks like the dark square bishop for black is better than the dark square bishop for white at the moment. This bishop on e3 is playing a purely defensive role, whereas this bishop on g7 is could potentially wreak a lot of havoc if the a1 h8 diagonal opens up, which happens frequently in the Gruenfeld. So Jon played f3, which is the mainline best move in the position. And then Chris went with the Seville variation with knight a5. So we're officially in a pretty famous variation. This was played a lot in the Karpov-Kasparov match, I believe is a 1987 match that took place in Seville. So that's why that's when the name came from, based on the location of the match. So Jon played bishop takes f7. That's pretty much the only move that you see just because of that match. Or I guess he's the wrong word. That's the only move I'm pretty much familiar with. But the database is showing that bishop d3 is played a lot, which is interesting because you know, I haven't seen this move played too much, so it's good to know there's like alternatives rather than bishop takes f7. But it looks like after c takes d4, computer is evaluating this as pretty even. And then yeah, so we kind of get into a line similar to the line that we just looked at. And it looks like the only difference is that it looks like white has a pawn on f3 in this variation, and that seems to be the only difference. Oh, no, knight f4 is not good here. Yeah, for some reason knight f4 is I guess with this pawn on f3, it's actually a better position for black here for some reason. I don't know. I don't want to take too much time analyzing this, but I'm kind of curious what the difference is. So anyway, so after knight takes knight to a5, Jon went with the most common move of bishop takes f7 check, and then basically recapturing rook takes f7 is forced. King takes f7 is pretty silly. After f takes g4, there's a check on the black king, and there's no advantage of playing king takes f7. So Chris played the forced move of, pretty much forced move of rook takes f7, and then Jon played f takes g4, which is forced as well, regaining the material. And now Jon's up a pawn, and black has to play actively to justify the pawn sacrifice, I believe. Like if this knight doesn't get into an active square like c4, if the black queen and this rook on a8 don't get active shortly, it could be a bad position for black. They might not get enough activity for the pawn sacrifice. So Chris played rook takes f1 check, which I believe is the best move. If black tries something like queen f8, then just queen a4 is very good. Connecting the white rooks and attacking this knight at the same time. And also the queen could potentially come to like c4 or b3 if the knight moves to pin the f7 rook. And then a move like b6, running the d takes c5. So here's a position where d takes c5 is good. Now that the knight's on a5, it can't jump into the e5 square anymore. At least it'll have to go back to c6 to go to e5, which is pretty slow. So rook takes f1, and then Jon played king takes f1. Queen takes f1 is the only real alternative. But the reason why this is no good is because knight c4 is pretty active here. With the queen still on d1, this knight c4 move doesn't carry as much weight because of queen b3 pinning the black knight to the king on g8. So Jon played king takes f1, which is the overwhelming move that this move is seen most of the time. And then Chris played c takes d4. I wonder if c takes d4 is necessary here. I know queen d6 is a pretty common move here, hitting the h2 pawn. But c takes d4 doesn't look like there's anything wrong with it. And then this capture, I think, kind of makes this. This capture kind of makes this dark square bishop better, I believe. Why does he keep doing that? Okay. All right. Anyway, so anyway, c takes d4 looks like a perfectly natural move here, and then Jon recaptured with c takes d4, which also looks perfectly natural. And then Chris played the very rare move here of queen d7. This computer is showing that it likes this move a lot, and I wasn't really sure the idea initially. I guess the idea is to swing the rook from A8 to F8 potentially, and then Chris kind of played a nice idea with Queen E6, the following move, to take control of this the weak diagonal. So it was interesting, very interesting idea for Black, I thought, with Queen D7, and then of course I hits the G4 pawn. I should mention that. So Jon played. I thought Jon played a good move here. With he played G5 in this position. So I thought that was a very active move by Jon. The only other move I think in the database at one position, the guy played H3. For some reason, when I looked at the game yesterday with the computer, the engine actually analyzed G5 as being slightly stronger. So I'm not sure if my processing power on my computer is going some other program or something. But for some reason, yesterday it was showing G5 as being slightly stronger, and today it's showing H3 as being slightly stronger. Maybe if I wait a couple minutes for a deep reply, it'll change its evaluation a little bit. But anyway, I like G5. I thought this was a good cramping move from Jon. It had like a long-term effect. I think the pawns looks very safe. The bishop on E3 covers it fine. And at some point this knight, even though it doesn't look like it's can get there yet, it looks like at some point the knight could try to get to F6 if this E pawn ever moves. So it looks like it's pretty tough for that knight to get to F6 at the moment. But the way the game kind of developed, the knight actually had a chance to get to F6. So I thought Jon played a good long-term plan with G5 here. So after G5, Chris played. He played an interesting idea. I didn't particularly like this move. I think Knight C4 is the logical move here. That's kind of the move I would have. I would have played. So after Knight C4, Queen B3, with the Queen on D7, you could play B5 now, and then let's just leave this variation. I'm trying to figure out if White plays A4, what Black should do. Okay, because obviously this after D5 this diagonal opens up. So this is definitely a typical kind of Gruenfeld idea for Black. Try to open up this A1 H8 diagonal and try to take advantage of the fact that the rook would be hanging. So it looks like this variation is pretty level. And then I guess if A takes B5. Oh yeah, knight to D2 check. Okay, winning the queen. Alright, so the queen on E6 is also making this threat of knight D2 pretty powerful, of course. So maybe this would be hard for Chris to see over the board. I'm not sure if he looked deep into this variation. But knight C4 looks like a very interesting move to me in this position. So Chris played Queen E6. Again, it's not I wasn't a big fan of this move, but I didn't think it was terrible. I mean, it protects the A2 G8 diagonal. It lets the knight come to C4, and also hits the E4 pawn. So it's a good multi-purpose move. It does accomplish a lot of things. But the problem with this move, I thought, is that it kind of lets Jon further his plan. He could really stop the threat pretty easily with E5, which is what he played. And I think this is a move that Jon probably wanted to play anyway. So I think Queen E6 kind of helped further White's plans a little bit. And I think with the pawns on D4 and E5, and it's very hard to attack the pawn center if Black doesn't have any C pawn or an F pawn or a D pawn. So it's really hard to break up the White center at this point. Looks like this bishop on G7 becomes kind of passive. Alright, so Jon played E5. And then Chris played a good move here, I thought, Rook D8. So this was a good move. Obviously, the D pawn is pinned to the E5 pawn now, so bishop takes E5 as a threat. With after D takes E5, then Rook takes D1. Obviously, would be very strong. So it develops a piece. It hits on the White center on D4, and it tries to exploit the pin along the D file now. So Jon played the very good move of Queen A4, and man, I really can't say enough about Jon's play in this game. It was he played very well. It looks like the whole game he was playing like first or second computer moves, and I don't know if he's just real familiar with these type of Gruenfeld positions, or if I think he just played a fantastic game. I was happy to see. I don't see Jon playing chess too much anymore, so I was real happy to see him play such a great game. Um, you know, uh, he's always been real good to me, John. He's probably like one of the first people I met in Las Vegas when I started playing chess, and he's always treated me like a king since I first met him. I always had a lot of respect for John. Um, so yeah, I'm happy to see him playing again. I hope he has lots of more good games left him in this match and moving forward. Anyway, after Queen A4, I think Chris played a little too slow here. Again, I really like Knight C4. I don't know if Chris was worried that after the bishop moved, he'd have to defend the A pawn, but I think the way Chris's position is looking with his bishop on G7 being so weak, I think he really has to focus on activity rather than pawns at this point. If he's like worrying about protecting pawns, the white pieces are just going to get even more active, and with this nice pawn center, I think black is just strategically busted. So I think Knight C4, trying to get activity and disregarding the A pawn, might be the best course of action, and maybe trying to mount some attack on the white king. I'm sorry, the white king looks a little exposed. So maybe trying to muster up an attack on the white king is the way to go. So anyway, so after B6, looks like John played another good move, Rook C1. So I think it's a logical move, get the rook off the diagonal of the bishop, even though this doesn't seem like there's any imminent threat. But then more importantly, just taking advantage of the open files, usually a good move, and this is not an exception. Just getting the open C file is very, very good for white here. So Rook C1. And then I think Chris played another inaccurate move here with Rook F8 check. Just 2 moves ago, he moved the rook from A8 to D8, and now to move it again from D8 to F8 seemed pretty illogical to me, especially because the king on F1 is pretty weak as it is. So putting the king, giving the king an opportunity to move to G1, I thought was a big mistake from black. The king is much more exposed on F1. If you put the king on G1, it's really safe over there. It guards the H2 pawn, and it's really hard for black to justify sacrificing the pawn. But already it's hard to kind of suggest good moves for black in this position. Black's position is pretty tough. Yeah, I don't see too much for black to do to try to generate any kind of counterplay. And then of course the rook on C1 also takes away the crucial C4 square from the black knight. So it's really kind of a just beautiful game from John. He's really suffocating the black army in this game. So rook F8 check, and then the king slid over to G1. And I think Chris really panicked here. He played bishop takes E5. So I could just I think the advice I try to give Chris almost every time I see him is to relax and have more fun when he plays chess. He always does look like he looks like he's trying too hard, in my opinion, personally, when I watch him play. Which you can't really fault someone for trying their best all the time. But personally, I always have like that philosophy that like stressing about your position doesn't make you play better chess. So I always tell Chris to have more fun, to relax, and try to enjoy his games more. I think he'll play better chess. So I could just picture Chris being really stressed at the board, realizing his position is pretty bad, and he kind of just tried to play like a desperation move with bishop takes E5, trying to liquidate the pawn center of white, get rid of the D4 and the E5 pawn. And I probably thought maybe attacking the E3 bishop and the E2 knight would be strong, but it's pretty simple for white to meet those threats with just queen D4, which you'll see, which is the actual game continuation. So yeah, I mean I can't. I'm not overly critical of Chris for trying to change the course of the game, but I kind of have a good like chess philosophy, which I think applies to life pretty well. Also, it's like if you're in a bad position, just try to make good moves. If you're in a good position, just try to make good moves, and if you're in a draw position, just try to make good moves. And I think in this position, Chris realized his position was bad, and he kind of made a bad move to make it even worse. So John's playing a fantastic game. He has the advantage, but I don't see. I think if Chris plays perfectly for like say the next 10 to 12 moves, I don't see why he can't put up some drawing chances still. John's an excellent player, but none of us are like super GM level where we're gonna play technically perfect. So if Chris could muster the energy at this point in the game to play the best move for say 10, 12 moves in a row, which is obviously a very difficult task. But if he could do that somehow, I think he'd probably have, I think he'd probably be able to have a good chance of drawing the game. So I think playing like bishop takes E5 is kind of a desperate move that definitely didn't work out in his favor. So after bishop takes E5, now the computer evaluation goes up, and not only that, but I think it's just pretty easy it's an easy position for for white to play, I believe. So Chris played queen takes e5, and then Jon finds the best move with queen d4. So centralize the queen and protect the bishop, and that's just an excellent move. And it's a natural move, of course, but it's still very good. These queen centralization moves are often pretty key in chess. And I'm also I should note with the king on g1 instead of f1, Black doesn't have this idea of queen takes h2 anymore. So I think that's another drawback of rook d8. Probably, I mean, if Chris really wanted to play this bishop takes e5 idea, he probably should have played it without playing rook f8 check first. Keep the rook on d8. But of course, in this position, then white would have the option of queen f4. Then, actually no, queen f4 would be bad because then rook f8, pinning the queen to the king. So yeah, so if the position was something like this, you know, at least it's still winning for white, of course, but at least there's some dynamic play in the position, and you know, showing the best moves like either king e1 or queen b4, which I think are both pretty hard moves to find, to be honest, especially queen b4. This is really like kind of a very subtle move. I don't think that's an easy move to find. It looks like after queen b4, then queen takes g5 looks good. So I don't know. I don't know if Jon would have found the move with queen b4. I think that would have been a tough move to find. And then even king e1 seems like you know, it's a kind of a gutsy move. It's moving the king towards the center is always difficult for a human player to do, especially when there's some heavy pieces still left on the board. So I think you know, playing rook f8 check first, and then this bishop takes e5 idea wasn't the best way to go. So Jon played queen d4, and Chris played queen e6 here. So basically, yeah. So once you have to play a move like queen e6, it's pretty bad shape for black here. So they're down a piece for one pawn, and queen e6 is you know, it's attacking the a2 pawn is not that big of a threat, and it just seems like the extra piece should win. I mean, the knight on e2 and the bishop on e3 are still better placed pieces than this knight on a5 still. So I think this is the only move where I was a little critical of Jon in the previous video. I don't think it was a bad move, but he played rook c2, defending the pawn on a2 and the rook on the knight on e2. But I didn't like this move particularly. I thought it would weaken the back rank too much, and I think the rook on c2 is kind of an easy target. I thought after rook c2, Chris should have opted for queen f5, which he didn't play. But after rook c2, I thought you know, still definitely obviously completely winning for white, but I thought black had some chances to kind of fight back a little bit in this position. So I think Chris missed his chance. I think queen f5 is the logical move here. I think it's pretty necessary that Chris plays this move here if he wants to try to fight back. I mean, after queen f5, computer showing the best move is queen d1. So the white pieces become a little bit more passive. It's still, you know, anytime you have an extra piece, that's still a huge advantage, but at least the queen on d1 is not nearly as active as the queen on d4, and you know, it looks like black could hang around for a little bit longer. So knight c6 was played. I think was a very big mistake. So I could see Chris thinking, this is another position where I'm thinking Chris is probably just thinking on general principles, thinking this knight's been out of play for a while, I need to get the knight back in the game. But he really doesn't. There's really no rush to get this knight back in the game, especially because he has a lot of different ways to get in the game anyway. He can play with b7 and c5, or b7 to d6. So I think playing the knight to c6 was a mistake, especially because it forces the queen trade. After the knight goes to c6, it vacates protection of the c4 square, and after queen c4, the queens come off, and the game's basically over. So yeah, so this is all pretty much forced. And then after knight e5, Jon played rook c7. And this rook is just devastating now. So on the 7th rank, hitting the a7 pawn, the e7 pawn, there's really not much for black to do anymore. So black played rook d8, and I thought Jon played another very good move here with bishop d4. So black is taking advantage of the open d file, and then white is closing the d file with bishop d4, and also attacking the black knight, of course. So after knight g4, Jon played rook takes e7. And Chris picked a good time to resign here. This rook g7 check looks pretty good, and just this rook on the 2nd rank is a beast. and there's not much for black to do here. Just pretty much sit around and wait for white to finish him off. Um, so in retrospect, I enjoyed this first game a lot. I think it's gonna be a good fight. Jon played excellent game one, so I think if he keeps up his current play, he's gonna give Chris some problems. But I think Chris could play a lot better game than this as well, and give him a good fight. I think in retrospect, the bad moves for black, I would say, were I didn't care for b6 here. I think this was the start of some trouble for Chris. I thought b6 was too passive, and then rook f8 I didn't like. So I think these two moves were pretty much the turning point. I mean, Jon always had the slight pull in this game, but that's not abnormal in a Gruenfeld variation. I think Chris would have found some counterplay at some point. But after b6 and rook f8, it was pretty hard for black to do anything. And then bishop takes e5 was just kind of sealing his fate a little bit. Just didn't promise anything. Anyway, I really enjoyed the first game, and yeah, I hope they let me make some more videos. This was a lot of fun. Again, I feel pretty honored to get to annotate the game one with video analysis. And yeah, I'm hoping for a good match. I'm not sure how many games they agree to, but hopefully hopefully there's a lot more good games like this, and hopefully they keep playing fighting chess. I don't want to see like a match with a bunch of dull draws, of course, and I'm sure they won't do that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of good fighting chess ahead. Anyway, thanks for watching though, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the next game, which I believe Chris said is on this upcoming Tuesday. So thanks for watching.